Well, welcome back. If you're feeling a little whiplash, it's from those readings. Zephaniah and Joy Harjo are throwing blossoms of hope and light. And John in Luke's gospel is dark and demanding in the midst of proclaimed chaos. Although to be fair to Luke and to John the Baptist, chaos lurks in those other readings too. Now, I had an interesting experience with these readings as I sat down to consider this sermon. I had just been to the eye doctor who had dilated my eyes, and so my peripheral vision was still kind of blurry. So, as if a halo gathered around the readings, I could see a clear circle of text, but it was surrounded by glow. And I think it allowed me to see the heart of these readings in a different way than I might have otherwise. And that experience reminded me of how disorder can sometimes illuminate what is in the field all around us that we otherwise might look past or ignore. Anyway, the season of Advent is for real. A jagged-edged landscape that includes brooding forests of darkness and spectacular summits of light. It isn't simply mythological, it is also descriptive of life as you and I know and live it. That's a dangerous world we live in. That's a bit of an echo from last week when I cautioned that it's a tough season for spiritual people. But you know what I'm saying. It's a dangerous world for humans and anything that breathes. For justice is suspended always slightly just beyond our reach. It hangs there for us to touch, but over a precipice we cannot span. The earth we call fragile will fume and crack and shake and likely grow and thrive and produce eons after our species has made it uninhabitable for our kind. It's a dangerous world we live in. The dark is not darkness to God, but there is still an absence of light for us. The activities of human evil fomenting greater threats to our safety and greater chaos at the shores of our hope. It's a dangerous world we live in. The season of Advent is all about the dangers in this world that we live in. I know that all over this city and town, throughout the country and the world even, where you live, I'm sure, preparations for Christmas began before Halloween. And now they've intensified until red ribbons and white lights are everywhere. But in the eye of that commercial storm, which has been brewing for over 2 months now, in liturgical churches like ours, the 4 weeks before Christmas are held as an important season all its own. For 14 centuries, in fact, Advent has stubbornly struggled to hold back the tide of Christmas until on December 24th, it can no longer withstand the procession of time. But why have a season like that when everybody loves Christmas? Why hold back Christmas or try to diminish its splendor? Well, to be honest, because it's a dangerous world we live in. You see, the Christmas spotlight is focused on an infant, and it's difficult for us to see past that sweet baby. In the story of a small family nestled around a newborn child, we need to be prepared to see and to hear what lies at the dark edges of that manger. It's tricky. We receive newborns with ah and ooh, and that's as it should be. An infant is more marvelous than we can possibly say. But the season of Advent gazes into the gap between the promise of what is to come and the chaos that is here and now. We peer into the gap at Advent, knowing that Christmas is just beyond us, but averting our gaze even though we would rather stare at the promise than face the chaos. Let me be clear, Advent is not a punishment. Rather, it's a method of building spiritual muscle. It's part of our spiritual practice that we take for granted, I think. To look into the gap between what has been promised and the chaos that is here is to become wiser and stronger and more savvy in a world in which we are required to be clever, not innocent. It's a dangerous world we live in. Now today, Zephaniah and Luke, we hear the wicked seesaw, the hope of God bringing us home, and the demand for repentance for the wrath that is to come. It's a dangerous world we live in, and we stalk the gap between chaos and promise all through this season of Advent. And then, for us, the Native American poet Joy Harjo tells us a story poem from within that gap. Chaos clouded the world in darkness when a spark of kindness made a light, opening a hole in the dark to enter into the next world. The people working together made a ladder, and together they climbed into that next world. It was kindness linked with togetherness, community, that pierced the chaos and opened the hope. Now please, hear this element of the danger we live in. The voices of cynicism and disbelief, that kind of thinking that is limited to pure reason and held captive by the dogmatism of only science and market economics, issues contact lenses through which we cannot see the presence of the sacred nor the shimmer of the promise. There's no arguing with them any more than it makes sense to argue with dogmatic religious thinking. They have a lens that limits their vision. But hear me. That can happen to us too. It's part of the danger we live in. But we have other lenses, if we can keep them, that allow us to look for light and life upon the entire spectrum of possibilities. We look, we listen, we intuit, we imagine, we feel, we seek wisdom from a power that is greater than ourselves. That wisdom whispers to us that we have a promise and the promise is coming. And at the same time, it warns us about the chaos within which we currently live. This wisdom has a voice all its own, and it asks us something very strange. Asks us for something potentially powerful and something clearly dangerous. It asks us, this wisdom that has its own voice, asks us to live as if the promise has already arrived. All the prophets, from Moses to Jesus to Muhammad to Dorothy Day, tell us that by living as if God's reign is already here, we can become midwives to the holy. Yeah, hold that for a moment. We can become midwives to God. As God painfully labors to bring forth the promise, we can be her midwife. If you think this is just a metaphor that I'm playing with, you'd be partially right. But it's a metaphor that is cast in the earth and soil of our reality. There are more ways for us to assist in the birthing of the promise than the number of stars that we can see with the naked eye. Conversely, there are countless ways that we can contribute to the chaos too, for it's all around us. In fact, the chaos is even within us. So, we have one more week of Advent. The pressure is intense. The cervix between God and us is thinning. The veil is nearly transparent. We have 1 week left to labor in our role as midwives to God. It should rightly make us speechless, even though we must speak. And we must work furiously to keep the chaos away while God is in so vulnerable a state. The way we practice our spiritual midwifery is to prepare a place in the midst of chaos for the promise of God to be delivered. The way we practice our spiritual midwifery is to look in the places and among the people where we least expect to find God's presence. Because we know that that's what the story of Christmas is all about, looking for God where and among those we least expect. It is the truth and the wisdom of that story hiding within the chaos surrounding it. The way we practice our spiritual midwifery is to act as if the promise has already arrived and we're living into its fulfillment. Being a midwife to God is dangerous. But it's the birth of the promise that gives meaning to the risk and even the life that we must one day lose. So, let's hold back Christmas just a little longer and live into that incredible privilege of being God's midwife. The promise is coming, but it's not here yet. Peace be with you.